Okay, March 6th, day 134 since the Hillary Huma emails came out. This is How to Catch a Spy Part 2. I'd like this, dedicate this to the Mark Levin Show. So Mark Levin Show, at Mark Levin Show. We forward these on to notable internet folks to forward onto their group if they find them valuable. Looking into the reason why Mark Levin is because he's looking into the wiretap, the two FISA entries for the wiretap. I've done a lot of looking at some of the evidence here, and I think I have a pretty good working theory. Right about a week before the election, this article came out in Salon.com, which was the Trump server communicating with Russia, and a guy named Franklin Foer, F-O-E-R, did this article. But several articles were kind of done based on the information collected here. What you're going to see here is basically three patterns of internet traffic, and this is the server traffic of the TrumpEmail.com server. Here's all the DNS information for the TrumpEmail.com server. But the red line, think of the red as Russia, that's going to be the communications to this Russian bank that supposedly Trump was communicating with. And then the blue line is going to be this second server at that same Russian bank, this Russian billionaire's bank. And then this yellow that you see underneath it, it's kind of hard to see, is going to be communication with this hospital group in Grand Rapids, Michigan, called Spectrum Health. So you'd wonder, what the heck is going on? Well, first of all, this Trump email server was configured in 2009, and it was at Trump Tower, and it was kind of like one of those servers that gets put in by IT, but then you go to a third-party email service, so you don't really need the email server anymore. It looks like it was only communicating with these three entities. It was communicating with Russian Bank number 1 in red, Russian Bank number 2 in blue, and then the Spectrum Health. Okay? And so in this article, this is passed around to about 10 different, well, first of all, it was supposedly discovered out of the trillions of DNS entries in the DNS database. So somebody had to all of a sudden, happen upon this one day, this one server. I don't believe that story for a minute. I believe that, and that goes into my setup for my working theory. Somebody had to put that server there, or somebody had to compromise this server. And so my theory on this is when you find an old server like this, especially an email server, in order for the web server, let's say Trump, Make America Great Again.com, and then for the Trump email, in order for the servers to communicate, they do this through something called ports. So you have to have permission to open a connection up between ports. And so usually the servers have a special ports they use, or special permissions and passwords between them that they use. So one of the great things about targeting, if you're a hacker, a great thing about targeting an email server is you can gain access to it to have a landing base, to have a foothold, to have kind of a beachhead to then go try to get into other servers. So this is an old strategy for hacking. It's been used since computers started, I think. And then what you do is you then close down the communication of this server to any other boxes that you don't want. You don't want people discovering this traffic, for instance, to other servers. So if you're setting up Trump here and you want to make it look like Trump is communicating with all these Russian banks, what you do is you set a program up to call out to these Russian banks every once in a while and create traffic between the Russian bank and Trump Tower. Then I could take that information, this trace line, basically, and I could take that to a judge, a FISA judge, and I could say, hey, look, Trump's communicating with this Russian bank. Or I could put it out into a news article about a week before the election, which is exactly what happened, and create a stir around that saying, hey, Trump's communicating with not one, but two servers in Russia. Well, it turns out that, the upshot of the article is Trump had no knowledge of this, and when they found out about the server in late September, they cut off the communication and so forth, and it kind of died. This story kind of died. But this is the type of server, once you gain access, you can use it to what's called sniff. You can sniff the network and see all the traffic going back and forth. So you can see, for instance, traffic if it's on the same network. It has the same router and same DNS. I know this is technical information, but if I can see the traffic on the network, I can see passwords going back and forth if it's unencrypted email, if people are still using unencrypted passwords. I can try different things. So my what I see here, and I have a background in network traffic analysis, so I'm not an expert, but what I see here is someone set up a demon or this little troll here that wakes up at some time and tries all these different ports and set it up to communicate back to these two Russian banks. And these points of interest are, this is the Republican National Convention and this is the Democratic National Convention. So you can see that really spikes up when Hillary knows that she's going to be the candidate, and you know that Trump's going to be the candidate. So they're going to try all their disruption things. If those don't work, then we're going to do this hacking thing of Trump. Okay, so this spectrum is somebody else logging in and seeing what the effects of the attacks are. They're seeing not so much the communication with the Russian bank, but they're looking and seeing where is there other vulnerabilities and so forth. And then what's happening is that this server, this footprint server that's at Trump Tower, is configured to send out that information back to these hackers. And these hackers are using that information iteratively to try to find the hack. And what you normally do is they email that information back to the hacker, and then it really spikes up here when the Trump disconnects the server, because then the email connection is broken. So this is, again, you could take this graph, if you're not a computer expert, and I took this graph to a judge, and I said, look at this, Trump's server is communicating with these two Russian banks, what's going on? Well, the truth behind Alfa Bank is that it's mainly an oil and gas company, and it's one of those NATO generals. Kurt Bildt and all the NATO generals invest in this company, and it's called L1 Energy. And L1 Energy is a direct offshoot of Alfa Bank, and it's such an obvious NATO plant to me after I looked at the network traffic. In network, NATO has this cybercrime group that I won't say who the group is, but they have this cybercrime group that specializes in this. But if you're a judge and you're not technical, and I came to you with this evidence on either in June for my initial presentation to one judge, and if I was denied, and I could come back to a panel of 3 judges that I appointed to overturn that FISA warrant, I could say, look at this communication of these Alfa banks. If there's no felony, the other rule for FISA is foreign actor. And here I show foreign actor. As a matter of fact, I show 2 foreign actors. So that was encrypted communication. So the FBI would say, we need to get in there to search warrant to be able to decrypt the communication, the transactions. Of course, these judges would probably say yes to that. So that's my working theory. Sorry, this is a little bit long, but it needed that kind of technical explanation. I'll post this now.